My girlfriend said I'm not her type, and it's really messing with my head. I met Ashley at my mom's clinic. It was our parents that set us up. Otherwise, I don't know if she'd have dated a guy like me. Because my blood is O negative, universal donor, my mom forces me to make a donation every 12 weeks. I was sitting with the tube hooked into my arm when her childhood friend, Sharon, appeared. Sharon recently moved back to our town and heard her former bestie became a doctor. She introduced her daughter, Ashley, who had stunning big blue eyes. Her skin looked even paler than mine. As a gamer, I'm basically allergic to fresh air, and she was dressed all in black. When she said hi, I squirmed on the bed, already sweating buckets. Luckily, Mom covered for me. Don't mind Ryan, he's gonna be lightheaded for a while. As she removed the tube from my arm, Ashley threw a hand up over her mouth and spun away, repulsed. Her shoulder clipped a plastic container filled with cotton buds, which spilled their contents across the floor. "You can just leave those," Mom said, as Ashley scooped them up. "It's okay. I'm totally OCD." While I sipped orange juice, our moms yacked away. I couldn't keep my eyes to myself, and every time I glanced at Ashley, she looked even more bored than I did, but I was too nervous to get a conversation going. Fortunately, my mama insisted they come over for food sometime. Ahead of the dinner party, I did push-ups in my room. Then I sat beside Ashley, who picked around her stir-fry. "Don't mind her," Sharon said, slightly embarrassed. "Ashley's not crazy about broccoli, or carrots, or honey, or garlic, or, well, she's just a fusspot in general." Underneath the table, my foot tapped so fast, and by dessert I'd barely strung 5 words together. Meanwhile, Mom and Sharon drained 2 bottles of wine. Since Sharon could barely stand upright, Mom said, "Why don't you stay in our guest room? Ryan can walk Ashley home. It'll get him out of that crypt for once." A lot of crime happened in our town, including stabbings and kidnappings. It wouldn't be safe to go by herself. Sharon practically shoved us out the door. "Don't look so scared, Ryan. Ashley doesn't bite." Ashley quietly walked beside me, arms folded. By the time we'd turned onto her street, all we'd talked about was the weather and how lame and transparent our mom's attempts to set us up were. Approaching her front door, I asked whether she liked video games. Her face lit up. "I play a ton of Terraria, although at the minute I'm addicted to Risks of Rain 2. For the next 20 minutes, I wasn't nervous at all. I got so in my element I was brave enough to say, maybe we could play together sometime. Sure. I ran straight home and bought every game she mentioned. It turned out online, me was way smoother than actual me. Over Discord, I kept making Ashley laugh, which helped melt away the nerves. Then I started complimenting her. It was like climbing in a warm bath and gradually putting more and more hot water in so you adjust to the new temperature, except with flirting. One night, over Terraria, I said, "How's this? If I beat you in a PvP, you've got to let me take you on a date." I heard her smile through the headset. "Sure." My hands wouldn't quit shaking. At first it looked like she might smoke me, but I pulled out a win at the last second. I took Ashley for walks around our city so she could get familiar with the area. Because of all the reports of robberies and break-ins, we never stayed out too late. But I also didn't want to run into my school bullies, most of whom knew about a hot emo chick with an absolute dumper who moved to town and were going feral trying to find her. I avoided taking her out during the day. Otherwise, there'd have been a higher chance of us running into my bullies. But Ashley didn't seem to mind. After a handful of dates, we got a McDonald's. Or at least, I did. Ashley wasn't hungry. She watched me eat the chicken nuggets on a table in the park, next to the duck pond. Staring into those eyes, I swallowed a gulp and laced my fingers with hers across the table. She gave my hand a squeeze. Then, slowly, I leaned forward and went in for a kiss. Ashley must have liked it, because we kissed a bunch of times. Finally, I eased back and said, "I like you." "I like you too," she said, smiling. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I wanted to take a picture of us and send it to every kid at my school, along with a few of the teachers who always called Menard. I got so caught up in all the kissing, I didn't realize how late it was. I told Ashley we should hurry home. We left the park and followed a road that cut through a little woodland. Ashley didn't understand why I'd become so anxious. Up ahead, I could see the light of a petrol station. I figured we'd go inside and order an Uber to take us home. But crossing the bay, a car with its license plate covered cut in front of us and skidded to a stop, brakes screeching. 3 men stepped out, each wearing masks. Grabbing Ashley by the arm, I made a break for the station, but the men blocked our path. As I shielded her with my body, somebody punched me in the gut, which made me drop to my knees. Then 2 sets of powerful arms wrestled me into the trunk of the car. I thrashed around, spreading out so I wouldn't fit, until the barrel of a gun pressed against my forehead. "Get in, or we'll kill the fucking bitch." It was totally black in there. I could hear sounds of a struggle, followed by muffled voices from inside the cabin. The car started moving, taking corners so fast I got thrown from one side to the other. The air was warm, and getting warmer by the second, and I remember thinking I'd run out of oxygen before our attackers got the chance to kill me. As they drove, I caught fragments of their conversation. "Take this next right. Do it in the forest. Nobody will see. They were gonna murder us." I pushed against the top of the trunk with my feet, but it refused to budge, and the car soon came to a stop. A door swung open, then male voices traveled around. The fact Ashley wasn't making a peep scared me worse than if she'd screamed, because at least then I'd have known she was alive and breathing. Suddenly, the men yelled over the top of each other. Then a gunshot went off. While the screams rang out, I attacked the roof with kicks and blows. At one point, my hand got sliced open by a piece of metal, but I didn't stop thrashing around until the world went quiet. Ashley, footsteps slowly approached the car. I held my breath. The trunk rotated up, and then the cold air of the night rushed into the compartment. All I could make out was Ashley, silhouetted against the moonlight. I jumped up, grabbed her close. "What the fuck's going on? Are you hurt?" Blood was spread around her mouth and dripping from her chin. Shaking her head, she pointed at the side of the car. We were in a barren lot beside an abandoned multi-story car park. Between us and a wall of trees, 4 figures lay amongst the weeds. I went in for a closer look. The figures were skinny and shrunken, and withered like Egyptian mummies. I could make out cartilage and exposed bone. "Don't freak out," Ashley said, approaching me from behind. I fell over and scrambled away in reverse. "I know this is crazy, but you don't have to be afraid, okay? I'm not going to hurt you. I don't normally go so overboard. But they were gonna slit our throats, plus I was overdue for a feed." As she reached down to help me, I threw up my cut hand between us, still dripping with blood, and whimpered, "Don't kill me." Ashley doubled over and started dry heaving. Between retches, she said, "Ryan, trust me, that isn't gonna happen. Oh, negative tastes gross, like worse than diarrhea. No offense, but that's why you don't need to be afraid of me." Using the back of her sleeve, she wiped away most of the blood from around her mouth, and then smiled at me, fangs bared, "Because you're totally not my type."
I met my girlfriend, Victoria, 7 months ago in a bar. We felt an instant connection and started dating 3 days later. She brought nothing but happiness, the perfect definition of a soulmate. So when I graduated from university, we both agreed to move in together. She's 2 years older than me and was already working, so I moved into her house. However, after moving in, everything went downhill. The first incident happened on the first night of moving in. Victoria works night shift, so she was getting ready to head out. "Babe, I'm off to work now. Just to tell you again, the neighbors next door get a little cranky at night, so just ignore them," she said sweetly. Yeah, I get it," I responded. I gave her a kiss goodbye and she left, leaving me alone in her house. I sat down on the kitchen table and got to work. For context, I work remotely as a character designer for a video game company. It was peaceful for a few hours until the clock hit 2 a.m. The cranky neighbors began screaming profusely. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it sounded like an intense argument. I tried ignoring it for a while, but eventually the sound became unbearable. Banging was heard on the walls, glass shattering on the floor, followed by more screaming and arguing. So much so that it sounded like multiple voices overlapping each other. I tried blasting music in my headphones, but that didn't help. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore, so I called it a night and stopped working. The next day passed by in a flash. I chose not to tell Victoria about the neighbors since it was apparently normal, and I didn't want her to think that it bothered me so much. It was her house after all. Nighttime came and I was watching TV in the sofa when the arguments from the neighbors came again. Thumping, glass shattering, furniture being thrown around. You'd think their house is a WWE ring. Jesus Christ, I muttered to myself. Suddenly, I started hearing banging on the door, followed by a blood-curdling scream. "What the fuck?" I said while pausing the movie I was watching. The neighbor was trying to break into the house. That's it. That was the last straw. I got up and went to the back door where the banging and screaming was being heard. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen table in case the man would break the door. Thank God it was locked. Just in case, I leaned against it, each punch crushing my back. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. For all I knew, the man could seriously hurt me. It felt like an eternity before what I'm assuming is a man stopped banging the door. Concurrently, the screaming stopped, and it was silent. "The fuck?" I muttered under my breath. There was no way I was going to live in these conditions. I decided that I was going to confront Victoria about it when she got home. With that in mind, I made sure all the doors were locked, windows shut, and went to bed. A few hours later at 6 a.m., my girlfriend got home and laid down in the bed next to me. She hugged me from behind and gave me a kiss on the nape, waking me up. "How's everything?" she asked softly. "Were the neighbors loud?" I grunted and turned my head to face her, rubbing my eyes. "What?" Victoria giggled. "How did it go with the neighbors?" I found it strange that she asked me that today but not yesterday. Maybe it was me being tired. "The husband tried breaking in," I said. "He banged on the door for at least 2 minutes, screaming. I thought that was the end for me. Seriously, Victoria, I don't think this house is safe for us to live in. As long as the door is locked, you should be fine. She smiled sweetly. I gave Victoria a serious look. Listen, I can't live with these conditions. I tried to say it as nicely as possible. I didn't even feel safe in this house last night. You're telling me this is going to happen every single night? Victoria looked down, her eyelids drooping down in discomfort. I felt sorry blaming her for something that wasn't her fault, but we obviously needed to do something about it. I can't fear for my life every night. I'll call the wife tonight and see if anything can be done. She hugged me tightly. Okay? I smiled and kissed her forehead. Thank you, baby. I know it's not your fault, but it's impossible to live in fear in my own house every night. On the following evening, Victoria left for her night shift. Once again, I was left alone in her house. She texted me around 15 minutes later, telling me that the problem was solved and that it should be better tonight. I thanked her and laid down on the sofa to wind down. I ended up falling asleep while watching a movie. I woke up a few hours later at 4 a.m. to screaming from the psychotic neighbors once again. Furious, I got out of bed and prepared myself for confrontation. I was ready to finally get to the bottom of this. However, as I walked closer to the front door, something felt off. I noticed the voices and banging a little closer than usual, as if they were in the same house. It was the first time I ever paid attention to where the sound was truly coming from, but it was still unexpected. Subtle, but unexpected. Following the traces of sound, the screams didn't take me to the front entrance, or to the house next door. They took me to the basement door, the only part of the house I haven't gone into yet. My heart began racing. This has to be my hallucinations. The sounds can't be coming from my girlfriend's basement, right? With my legs trembling, I tried to push the basement door open, but it was locked. It only resulted in even louder screams coming from downstairs. They sounded like a cry for help. "What the fuck is down there?" I muttered. The thought alone sent shivers down my spine. Thankfully, or unthankfully, my uncle taught me lock-picking when I was younger in case I was in a dangerous situation where I needed it. Thanks, Uncle Will. So if there has ever been an opportunity to use that skill, it would be now. I took 2 paper clips and started fidgeting them inside of the lock. In just a few minutes, the door unlocked, but it still wouldn't open. I looked around the house for anything I could use, until I found a crowbar. Using all my might, I pushed the door open. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. Instantly, I heard loud, blood-curdling screams piercing my ears. Screams that you would only hear in horror movies. Covering my ears, I forced my way downstairs. What I saw was horrific. Dead bodies of dozens of guys were organized in a line on the floor across the basement. Worst of all, every guy there looked to be around my age, many looking like the exes Victoria had talked about in passing. Above them was a jar. Inside it looked to be their faces with a large glow surrounding them. They were screaming in absolute, agonizing pain. From what I saw, it looked to be their souls. The sealed, trapped souls of innocent men facing endless pain in their afterlife. The stench was unbearable. Their bodies were bled out, as if everything inside of these men were sucked out to leave only their pure skin. Despite that, their faces were somewhat recognizable, each body neatly placed to keep its original shape. Their names were written in blood in front of each body. Jack, Noah, Michael, etc. Their screams sounded more like loud gasps from up close. The room was so loud I was getting dizzy. The screams only got louder. It sounded loud enough to screech into my brain. My mind went blank, my body shaking at the thought that this was my girlfriend's creation. It got even worse when I got to the end. Another name written in blood, with no body behind it, as if it was still being prepared, Dylan. That was my name. I then got a notification on my phone. A message from Victoria. My heart stopped just by reading it. "Hey babe, on my way home. Sorry about yesterday. Let's have some fun tonight."
went to see my mother for the first time in many years. She looked exactly like my memories. It had been 20 years, but she hadn't aged a day. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes searching mine with dim recognition. I sat in my car for hours, checking and rechecking the address. I hadn't seen her since I was 5 years old. The walk up to her door was nervous agony, but I couldn't chicken out now. This was important. Hi, I stammered, my rehearsed speech going out the window. "You probably don't recognize me, but I'm your son." She dropped the mug she was holding, sending coffee and shards of ceramic across the floor. I went on quickly before I lost my nerve. "Dad passed away recently, and he left me your address. He wanted me to see you." She moved to touch my face, her hand stopping at the threshold. "John, please, come in." We talked for hours. She wanted to know everything that had happened since she'd last seen me. Since she left us, I remember she never approved of the family business. She would argue with Dad about the morality of it. When he began training me at age 5 to take his place, she left one night and never came back. Not even a note. But he kept up with her, said he had his ways of keeping tabs on her. He would only tell me it's too late when I asked why we didn't go see her. It was the only time I ever saw him cry. Eventually, I stopped asking. When he died, he left me the tools of the trade and Mom's address. Now, sitting across from her, 20 years of resentment came oozing up. She was halfway through asking if I'd met a girl when I demanded to know why she abandoned us. "Oh, sweetie," she said, "we were on 2 different paths. I wanted one thing, he wanted another. I did my best to control my anger. But you couldn't call or visit?" She looked uncomfortable. "Honey, you wouldn't understand. When I left, I changed. I'm not the same person I was then. I left because I loved you." Those words cut deep. It was time. I remembered the letter Dad left me in his will. I had to know if he was telling the truth. I took her hand in mine. It was cold. Claudite mortuis. Her body went rigid under the binding spell. I took the water from my bag and made the cross of St. Peter upon her palm. Her skin went ashen, her eyes a deep scarlet. There it was, Dad's final wish, a final test. I looked her in the eyes as I slid the stake between her ribs. When her body collapsed into dust, I couldn't tell what I felt. Mostly I felt nothing at all. Looking down at the ashes, I reminded myself that vampires aren't people anymore, regardless of who they used to be. Just like Dad had taught me.